Welcome back to Horrifically Well Read, Bled, and Said. We are so excited today to be talking to Amber Hathaway, author of the Little White Flower series, book two of which, Hallowed Deadly Seeds, is releasing June 30th. Welcome, Amber, to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad you're on. I have been looking at this cover, the first one and the second one. The imagery is stunning, and the twins in talent connected us, Haley and Hannah. And so I just wanted to give them a quick shout out, but also these covers are amazing. They're beautiful. I mean, they're so full of emotion and evocative. Like I feel like I could, not that I would, but I could cut off the front and frame them because they're really pretty.
My cover illustrator, Eva Mooch, she's amazing. So she actually reads the whole book and comes up with an illustration based on that.
So she's an illustrator and beta reader.
Yeah,
That's
that's
awesome.
incredible. I love that because, I think that we've talked to a lot of authors and how like covers come about and stuff like that. So the fact that it's kind of organic to someone that has truly read the book and sort of picked out things that they, have stuck out to them, that's really cool. That's a really cool connection to what's inside.
And we do have like an author wall of like book covers. So I think that you should send us a PDF at some point so we can add you to it because it's so pretty.
They are truly beautiful, definitely. So, for our listeners that maybe are not as familiar with your books, when someone is picking up this series, what would you like them to know? How do you tee it up?
So the basic premise is it starts out with Alice Drayton as our protagonist, and she is sent to the middle of nowhere, Maine, to help her clean out an estranged relative's estate. So she and her brother are sent up north into the middle of nowhere to this town called Evanston. And so Alice is really interested in her family's history, and her grandmother ran away from home as a teenager and would not talk about her past. So Alice sees this as like the perfect opportunity to finally figure out what happened all those years ago. But when Alice gets to Evanston, the town is not just like some abandoned little town in the middle of nowhere. There's a bunch of people here, and they are part of this insular religious community that is very wary of outsiders. And as Alice starts digging into her family's past, she very quickly realizes that the tragedy in her family is just a small piece of this town's very dark history. And so it becomes her mission to try and change things and try and stop the wickedness from keeping going. So that's the basic setup for the series.
Really great, very cohesive, awesome job. Like, did you practice that or do you just have it down pat? Because like that was awesome.
I mean, didn't I do practice sometimes, but like I didn't practice this time.
It's really, I mean, it's so cohesive and to be able to cover two books. Alice, by the very early on, I think learns like I should not be digging into what's actually happening here. But she doesn't realize that until about midway through the first book. And so her parents are like, you've gotta, go clean this out. We've got, can go with your brother to help him. And it's in the middle of nowhere, like, really, and, there's no cell phone service, and so, they're like, "Okay, no problem, there'll be a house phone." Wrong, there's not, and not only does that, but the community does not believe in having telephone, so they're, like, really isolated, so when they start dealing with this community of people that think a lot differently than they do, there's really not a lot of recourse for them to kind of they have to go in here, get everything cleaned out, try to just deal with how funky this town is. And Alice just can't help herself. She's like an amateur or budding genealogist. And she's like, okay, I'm going to stick with the brother sister bond and relationship there.
Absolutely. Interestingly enough, the inspiration for Alice and Andy was the movie Urban Legends Bloody Mary. So I was really into urban legends as a teenager. And when I watched that, I really loved the brother sister dynamic. So I have a younger brother and I love him dearly. But when we were kids, like we're both very strong personality. And so we got along some of the time, but then we also very much did not get along some of the time. But I was like, if I had an older brother, I'm sure he'd be nice to me. Um,
Mm, mm.
and so I kind of, after seeing the dynamics between the siblings in that movie, I came up with 2 characters who had a close sibling bond. And I actually came up with the idea for the characters before I had the idea for the book. And just when I came up with the book idea, I was like, "Oh, these characters would work really well in that story."
I love that. That's the third urban legend movie, right?
Yeah.
That's funny because I was just asking on Threads, like, what's the most underrated, like, slasher of that, like, post-Scream cycle, and that movie came up, and I was like, "I didn't even know it existed," and it's even directed by the director of the Mary Lambert from the original Pet Sematary adaptation. I was like, I this is the second time hearing it. I obviously need to watch this movie, so
That's wild that like, you is how much film you've watched, that's surprising.
yeah,
Well, thank you for bringing it to Adam's, like, forefront to get him going on that.
and I
I'm
can
sure he'll report back to you.
yeah, watch specifically for that dynamic with the brother and sister too, so very cool.
So, with this book, there is I feel like at this point I have to talk a little bit and, like, a little bit of won't go in deep spoilers or anything for book 1, but I think we have to get into a little bit of the meat of it so we can talk about, like, why you need to go into book 2 because you kinda leave us on a I don't wanna say a cliffhanger, but we're like, "And then what?" But you really become involved in this town. Some of the first things that tip you off is, like, uh, it's like, "Oh, come to our house for dinner," and it's like, we really don't want to. We don't know you, but okay, we'll be polite. And then it's like the conversations about like modesty and the praying. And it's like, okay. And, eventually you start to realize like this is a uber religious community, pretty intense. And, they're just kind of like, God, I got to get this done. Like the nearest gas station is 15 miles away. And they're just like, we got to get done. We want to get out of here. And so finally, the people that they're having dinner at their house, they're like, hey, do you want some help? Like we can send somebody over to help. And they're like, yeah, like we'll take some help because we want to get out of here as fast as we can. So Riley comes over and Alice and Riley really kind of hit it off and have this really immediate, like sweet understanding and fall in love with like kind of like how puns and math and just things that, they have their own little style. They get each other and, that's a sweet little budding thing, so and Riley's just, he's very demure and he's just very respectful because that's how the whole community has raised him to be. Alice really kind of makes him question everything of, when she's like, "Well, do you wanna go swimming with me? And do you wanna do this? Do you wanna go to the library?" And he's like, kinda like, "I can't, I shouldn't." And so quickly in the town starts to get kinda angry with Alice that she's, potentially a whore for just the most basic things of just being a girl. And I found myself in book 1 being like, all right, that's pretty ridiculous. That's pretty ridiculous. But by the time I got to book 2, like even within like the first 15 to 20 pages, I was like, my God, I don't even want to read this. I'm so angry at these people. I'm so angry with them. They're
Which
so
you means you know it's written very well.
that's what I'm saying. It's so rage inducing. I mean, this book covers God, it's on topics of motherhood, feminine bodies, patriarchy, bang. I mean, backwards as hell. It's like they live in the dark ages. And like I said, they don't even believe in like landlines. Like Riley's never heard of a cell phone before. Any belief systems that they are subjected to. So that's what I wanted to get into with you. Some of these themes and shitty belief systems that you explore in here. Were you always into cults or like how did this come about? How did this story come out? Because this cult does some fucked up things.
So I got this the basic idea for the story when I was 19, when I read Children of the Corn by Stephen King.
Mm.
And so I won't go into the specifics of the question, but I had this question that the story raised for me. And I went to bed that night and I woke up in the middle of the night with like the idea for a story. And so I like hammered out like the first few paragraphs. And so the cult aspect, of course, comes from, the story that inspired it was Children of the Corn. But I also like the story took a long time to develop and evolve. So I wrote a very rough draft as a teenager, but I continued to work on it and develop it over the years. And so when I was in college, something that not everyone knows about me, because I have a PhD in physics, but in undergrad, my degrees were half humanities, half STEM. So
Mm.
math, sorry.
No, that's interesting.
And so math and physics on one side, and then I had my second major in women's gender and sexuality studies and a minor in ethics and social and political philosophy. And so I think the WGS coursework in particular, like, I mean, I was always kind of aware of these issues, but having that framework, I think really helped me frame some of the issues in the story.
And so, because you really know how to stick the knife in and twist it and build these these really myopic and opinionated and just outright loud and wrong characters that you love to hate. At least I did. And it's mostly because like they don't know how. I mean, this has been going on for generations in this town of this like being sequestered and not knowing the the residents right now. I mean, they're being told and indoctrinated that this is God's will. That anybody that comes from out of hell, like they won't even let delivery trucks come in because they could be spreading heathen type behavior. Ultimately what that is, it's about control, just never letting anything else in so they don't have to deal with that. But I was thinking on some of these ways of just like how we see things now being controlled through language or even any time that you've watched, cults or religious people in the past, whether it's Mormonism and like the keep sweet mentality or, any other kind of religious like devotion or whatever. But it's really hard to argue if you're told that like this is the will of God. And if want to be doing right by him, I mean, it's just the ultimate control tactic.
Really is, and then to top that off too is that they have, I'm just thinking about this because I was, posting a quote from book 2. I'm doing little snippets on, Blue Sky, and, that of course there's also the idea that if you question anything, that's the devil deceiving you. So even having like as soon as you have an idea that doesn't align with the philosophy, you need to instantly reject it because otherwise you're letting the devil in.
Yes, and it's like they are so suspicious. I mean, anything that goes awry, anything that happens, and it's almost like, and I know you touch on this a little bit more in book 2, but essentially, not okay, so I guess without going into being too spoilery, like because we do want people to read book 1, but how aggressive would you say the cult is? Like my way of thinking of describing it was like if you've ever thought that in real life, the whole situation with the Kool-Aid and cyanide was bad, like, these people are worse.
Yeah, I mean, it is a very intense, very insular, isolated belief system, and it is very much you must conform. And there are some pretty steep consequences if you don't conform.
And just the overall sacrifices that are required that almost very Old Testament like of, we have to make sacrifices, without going into too much detail on that. And it's for the love of God and it's for the benefit of the town. I was saying to Adam, one of my absolute favorite movies, and I love watching it is Hot Fuzz.
Oh,
And it's like, where they're like for the greater good. And it's like that's
yeah.
this town. So, I was digging it because I love that where they're like they're all a little fucking corrupt because they're all drinking the Kool-Aid for lack of a better way to say it, but it's like they've all bought in. And anytime they get an inkling that someone might be doing something that is not pious, like you said, there's some very stiff punishments for that.
Yeah, and I love the way that it kind of melds, obviously we're talking the religious cult, but then even bringing in Hot Fuzz, we're talking about folk horror and, a lot of times folk horror will be very like either like old gods, pagan, that kind of stuff. So to kind of mix the folk horror with the like more sort of like almost like fundamentalist religious kind of thing was a really interesting concept. So just wondering kind of how, hearing that your studies were in those things went and Children of the Corn coming in too when it came to sort of like melding those things influence wise, what kind of other things were you looking at, and then what kind of were you using those to build upon to make your world that you've created?
Well, I think one thing of note here is like I have kind of a weird religious upbringing. So when I was very little, we went to a Pentecostal church, which was very scared 4-year-old, and we ended up getting kicked out when I was 4. But like I had me very terrified of everything for a very long time.
Yes, okay, you can say that, and I'm like, okay, I'm tracking with you as soon as you say that. Go on.
Yeah, so I think definitely there were elements of, like, not necessarily, like, on a conscious level at first, but, on a subconscious level, pulling in these things that, like, terrified me as a child because, I just remember being absolutely terrified anytime that, like, if my parents said a swear word or something like that, are they gonna go to hell for that? So there's the whole, like, some religious trauma going into it and, getting into that with some of the characters and just also, like, learning about real life cases and just kind of, like I watched a ton of there's a was a YouTube channel, I don't think she runs it anymore, but it was called Ex-Bundy Diaries.
Mm,
And I watched a lot of that too, when I was doing my edits to try and, like, make sure that the philosophy was consistent and kind of, like, dig into some of the experiences that people, because we left again, we got kicked out when I was 4, so I had the experience as, like, a very small child in the church, but someone who was in it when they were a teenager and young adult, like, what was that experience like? So I pulled from, their experiences,
Mhm. What did y'all
and so
do to
tho
get kicked out?
if you're well,
I
yeah.
my mom's story is that my sister got us kicked out by asking too many questions, but my sister was, like, 1.5, so I don't know.
You know what? I mean, the way that you've written this book, it's like I could see them being mad about that, you know?
About even like a toddler, essentially,
Yeah.
yeah. That's crazy.
Yes.
That's really interesting. I can imagine though, as, you know, having experienced that at such a young age, but it also like it kind of develops into that, is this a memory? What really happened? What do I really remember? But like just having the real emotional heaviness of those things because, you know, I think I've been a couple of times and maybe watched some Pentecostal, services before, and it really is very scary. The speaking in tongues, the intensity of, like, the things that are said, so I can only imagine on, such a tender brain, like, how much that would kind of affect you even going, into adulthood, like, those memories.
Was this cathartic to you in the way that you wrote this?
I think parts of it were also a lot of parts that, like you were saying, kind of made my blood boil, like,
Yeah.
having to dig into that mindset and accurately represent the characters as they believe. There's, some chapters in book 2 told from one of the antagonist's perspectives, and having to, like, sit in his head was a very, like, frustrating, like, because I can see where he's coming from, and I think it's a terrible place, but, so there's
I
definitely sorry?
No, I was gonna say I definitely hear like I can definitely imagine how difficult that is, to sit in his brain and think that, but and just be
Yeah.
because it's crazy. I feel like I've read a lot of books like this in terms of like dealing with patriarchy and like bad over aggressive men and just similar things like this, but I just don't remember being this pissed off because I think that you just do oppression in a way that I mean, I'm reading it, I'm like, "All right, come on, y'all need to get out. Y'all need to leave. Like, you need to go." And it's just like, but you can't. Like, they cannot get out. It's like there is no safe exit. There is no way to get going. And it's just like and the way you write this book, I mean, you're very like, I don't know what to say. It's like you're very much like in the moment all the time. It's like as if you're actually experiencing this where you feel just as trapped as they are. At least I did. And so I think that's why the level of like oppression and just belief systems bothered me so much because I mean, it was like, okay, and she's like, "Well, I don't have any like clothes to wear." And they're like, "Well, too bad. I'm sorry that you didn't have any clothes to wear, and I'm sorry you didn't know that you were supposed to wear, but you still violated community standards, so you're going to need to be whipped for that." And it's like, what? You know, and there's just like no forgiveness, even though the tenants are built upon forgiveness. Like, I think it also triggered me because it felt very like MAGA to me right
Mhm.
now of like, are you sure that like this isn't where they want this to go back to? Is this where like our school boards are heading? Is this where like some of these communities of just being like, yeah, we want ultimate control and we just want everybody to mandatorily go to church and like follow this. But like when Alice starts asking questions at the beginning, once she finds out what is so rotten about this community and how they consider it sacrifice and she considers it murder, they justify this. And she's like, okay, but like she's asking, but like, doesn't this count as life? Doesn't this count as life? Like, but you wouldn't do this. Wouldn't it be easier to go about things like that? And they're like kind of like, don't just stop asking questions. Like, I just need you to buy into what our beliefs are. Okay. Like we've already determined this. It doesn't matter if they're right or wrong. It doesn't matter if it makes sense. It's how we do it. And I just felt that to be so oppressive and awful.
But also very familiar in this day and
Yes.
age.
Yes. Also, Amber, you wrote a main character whose name is Stephen Miller.
That's the way Stephen Miller's name came about was I was looking for most common surnames in Maine. So a number of the characters in the book, their last names were just what are common surnames in Maine, and Miller was one of them. And since I had read Stephen King's Children of the Corn, Stephen came from I was like, it's a little tribute to Stephen King.
That's crazy, but
So
you end up like as everyone says, like, well, Stephen Miller's really the one running the country and Project 2025 and saying like, "Oh, we're gonna end up as the housemate," or is that or what am I looking yeah,
Handmaid's Tale.
Handmaid's Tale. It's like, yeah, that's basically what you're writing about here. So I thought that was
it's
just all too funny every time Stephen Miller came up, who happens to be the mayor. And I'm like, "Okay, all right." So that was just like, that's too funny. I feel like that often happens, especially since he wrote this so long ago
Or
and that
started it,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and that you could just be kind of, I don't wanna say foreshadowing, but having this overlap was just too coincidental, very cute.
yeah, well,
You know yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, well, not to, like, spoil anything, but, like, so in the 3rd book, the autism is a big thing, and I won't give any details, but, like, I wrote that one. I finished it in, like, November of 2024, the first draft of it,
Oh, no.
and then, of course, like, RFK Jr. comes in and starts doing all the autism stuff, and I was
Oh,
like,
Oh,
"Are
no.
you serious?"
Oh, no. Like, I wanna read it because like, I wanna keep following the series here, like, I'm very invested, but I'm also still pissed, and I'm already pissed because, again, leave us on a I mean, I think book 1 to book 2, I don't wanna say, like I said, it wasn't like a cliffhanger, but it was kinda like, "Now what?" Like, it's not over, and you know it's not over. Book 2 is a cliffhanger. It is an absolute cliffhanger, and then you have, like, a prologue that is, like, 11 years later, 11 years from now, and it's like, shit. So it's you really have it set up that, I think readers are going to be really engaged and just rightfully angry. And I think what really got me pissed is I just feel like something like this could genuinely happen. There probably are church groups and communities that just I mean, I have a lot of very concerned point there's like a lot of you touch on a lot of topics and I'm going to say some trigger things that Amber you're really good about um, making sure that you touch on the triggers. Um, there are a few characters in here that are just womanizers and just are infatuated with what they can do to women and just seeing them as disgusting meat. And one of them is Riley's uncle. And Riley kind of says at first, like when they go to the cemetery, he's like, I don't want you to be alone because Uncle Rich is going to be there. And you don't really know what that is. And then at one point they run into Uncle Rich and it is just like he just sees her as like a walking pair of tits and with Alice. And I mean, some of the things that he said, I don't think I could even be prepared for how gross. I mean, and even into book 2, he's just kind of like, I mean, I wouldn't mind like taking a chance with her or whatever. And it's like that's my like person, dude. Like you're my uncle. You can't be like saying that. But it's like guy code is like, yeah, but like it's okay for me to tell you that like I don't want to bang her, right?
Well, I
Like,
think that, like, that whole idea of, like, at family gatherings, that one, like, relative that everyone knows is a certain way, and it's just, it's been that kind of way of, like, accepting it and making sort of adjustments for it when that's, like, so wrong. So,
yeah,
like,
like for my uncle growing up, be like, wow, you're turning into a real pretty girl. I'm like, ew, please get away. Red flag, you know what I mean? Did any of those situations, like as you were writing them, did you have to
is
like
that based on, like,
yeah.
any kind of experience or stories you've heard or, like, just sort of an amalgamation of, like, all the horrible dudes?
Well, and I just want to say real quick before you answer that, there was another situation where I mean, she's just one of the characters is just they're just in the congregation just doing some work and another character comes in and starts messing with her and it's like now she's supposed to be in trouble. Like she wasn't doing anything.
The victim
Yes,
blaming,
and
yeah.
it's like, yeah, but it's ultimately she's gonna have to take the punishment for this. So I just found that to be not only was it like tolerated, it was like, and we're gonna punish women for it.
Yeah, so a lot of these issues kind of like so when I was in college all the way through grad school, I was involved with our campus feminist organization. And a lot of like not necessarily the specifics of the story, but we do take back the night every year. And
Yeah.
the way we would do it is there's also a survivor speak out.
Okay.
Every year, the faces, because I was at UMaine for 12 years. I went to Take Back the Night for 10 years because I got involved my junior year. The faces would change as people graduated, but the stories were all the same.
Really?
People, yeah, just going through like these absolutely awful experiences. And it's like, this happened on campus or this happened in my home and so I think just being in that kind of environment and seeing what a raw deal so many people have gotten, and I'm also involved in, I volunteer at a domestic violence resource center on, I'm part of like their outreach and like educational committee. And so again, like hearing the stories and everything, it definitely, I want to give voice to the experiences of survivors and to
Mhm,
basically should say like show the hypocrisy and everything that they're up against. Because in a religious community like this one that's deeply patriarchal, it's even worse than like in the general public because oh well, here are all these rules you're supposed to be following, and like I'm gonna use this like little loophole to blame you for what happened to you.
mhm, mhm. And I feel like, there's this thing, like, even in school where they're like, "Okay, you need to have, tank tops with this thickness," or, "The girl's shoulders are out too much." Both of my our girls have been like, "Why why can't you just teach boys to, like, mind their business rather than, like, why am I supposed to be hot in the summer and I have to have a certain thickness on my strap, or my shoulders are supposed to be too sexy?" Like, why aren't we just reinforcing that, we should be able to exist without being sexualized? And I'm glad that they have that, but I mean, that's kind of where in this it's like the whole town just kind of starts chanting like whores. This person's a whore and that person's a whore, and it's like, anybody that you can just kind of ostracize and make them feel like shit, it's like it's condoned, encouraged, I think, in this community, which I think just leads to a lot of the community being built on like spite and just hatred and uh liturgical practices. It's just, and I think that's where, again, coming from my own background where I'm deconstructing, I'm just like, it really upset me. We're several parts of like having to process through this where it's just like the level of unfair that we experience and I'm just supposed to accept as a woman, just it sucks.
And I think that you touch on that when you talk about, how these stories that you hear over the course of, multiple different sort of sets of students that are coming in, and for these stories to be so similar, it kind of touches on the universality of some of the themes and the things that you're talking about in these books. But I did want to touch on some because you said you were at UMaine. So I want to talk about like the location a little bit. So obviously, do you still live in Maine now?
I do. I live still in the Bangor area.
Okay, awesome. So is there, obviously, I think Maine is a much bigger state than sometimes people realize and, kind of goes through a lot of different areas and things. And so is having a place that is this sort of out in the nowhere kind of that kind of thing, is that something that is sort of familiar to people in Maine or in these areas? Or is there towns that are similar to this that you've experienced that you were like, oh yeah, I can definitely set this here?
So the location kind of came to me. So my dad, I don't know if this is like a typical thing people do, but my dad likes to drive. Like that's something he does just for fun, not with like a location in mind, just drives.
But
And
that is
so
my favorite way to decompress, and if it's not that, then it's mowing. But that
That's cool.
something
Yeah.
about that motion just feels right to me.
Yeah.
And so when I was a kid, my dad would just drive us kind of all over the state,
Oh,
not down south because that's where the people were and he didn't want to see the people, but
that's all.
if you go north, east, or west of Bangor, there's trees, and like, yeah, there's occasional like villages and whatnot, but there are like, we'd be driving down these dirt roads for miles with surrounded by nothing but trees. And as like a young child with a big imagination, you can just imagine like if the car broke down, like, I mean, this was, the 90s, the early aughts,
Mhm.
there were no cell phones there,
Mhm.
and so if we're not near a landline, like, what would we even do? So, I think, my young mind, like, was already kinda, like, processing and thinking about those kind of things because that was, like, a thing I would think about. It's like, "What if we ran out of gas? What if the car
Uh,
breaks down?"
you just
So
sharing that made a level of tightness in my chest.
A little bit of panic there.
Well, do
Just
you remember when we were on that trip in South Carolina?
yes.
And there it was, like, exactly what she's describing. I mean, we are just
It was funny at that
tree
time
after pine tree, pine tree. I know, but there was, like,
we
the
even had
service.
like a GPS, but it kind of like I don't know if there was like an accident on the freeway or something like that, but it took us in these back roads, and it's very similar of like,
And I'm
I
sitting
haven't
here
seen a
thinking,
gas station in like 50 miles, and I'm like,
"Yes."
"Okay, what would we do?" Like,
And
I
it's
don't
like,
even know.
and it's starting to look a little wrong turn like,
Yeah.
just where, like, there's nobody. And then there's some houses, but, like, who lives here?
Yeah.
What do they do?
And so was it like within that you were like, "Okay, what if there was a village in here?"
yeah, I was like, "Well, if, there's gonna be some place to, like, hide a town that people didn't know about, Northern Maine's the perfect place to do it because it is basically all trees up there."
That is amazing.
Mhm.
I love that.
I love that. I hope you're happy to hear that all the parts that you hope would irritate somebody did irritate. That it
Yeah.
especially coming from someone who, like, I have a sociology degree, but I did a lot of classes with, gender studies, women. And so I really feel like with just the way that like women have been writing horror and how well we write it. And I think that not only do you have some true, like, this is, I mean, you're not heavy on like blood or gore. You're heavy on like humans as the monsters and the absolute like fucked up things they do in the name of religion. But you also really touch on just like the monsters of like everyday life of just, not having any freedoms and just not having really any choice and lives being stolen because of, in the sake of control. And uh it just, I felt like you really gave a name to, I don't know how you would describe the type of horror that you write, so I'd love to hear about that. But I mean, whatever it is, it's like, it's, I felt like I was kind of reading a thriller, but like I'm not, because you're not writing it like that. Yet it is propulsive, but it's also just like, my God, I hope to God this never happens to me. I guess you just hit on some fears.
Yeah, as for like the genre angle of things, I say it's kind of like folk horror vibes, and that's like the best way I can describe it. There's definitely a lot of psychological elements going on. I really try to focus on the interiority of the characters and their experiences, because I think, you know, for me, that's what really scares me is when a character I care about is scared and I can feel their fear, like that really gets to me. So I do focus a lot on what scares this character and like what does it feel like to be in their shoes, and it can be a very very uncomfortable experience. Like there have been passages, when I'm writing them where I'm just like feeling like, my chest tightness and like all the anxiety. Like just there's a couple chapters that like anytime I reread them, like I just get so anxious and I'm waiting for the author to like come and stop things and it
You're like,
doesn't
it's
happen, of
me.
course, because it's like so but yeah, I think just focusing really on the physical I mean, that's, like, something I pull too, like, there's a lot of anxiety in here. I've had a lot of experience with anxiety and panic, and so, like,
Mm,
I pull out all the metaphors and, like,
does yeah.
descriptions for anxiety that I can come up with. That's actually something funny. Like, I remember one time I had a panic attack on a walk, and, like, I was only, like, walking literally around the block, but for some reason on that particular day, it was too much for me, but, like, by the time I came home from the walk, my husband encouraged me to keep going. We made it through, and it's like, I have a new metaphor, like, for anxiety now, and, like, I wrote it down to use in a book, and so
You do such a great job with exploring anxiety in here and talking through some of the relationship that Alice has, the work that she's done with her therapist, and touching on some ADHD with Andy, and just, Alice being like, she's a vegetarian, but like she's in this area where they don't believe in it and they think it's like wrong. So she's like, am I just not going to eat? Like, there was just so many things that, I mean,
It's
this
funny
is a
because it's
full
like
book of anxiety. Like, I
yeah,
can't really think of much that isn't,
it's like the
other than,
smallest to the biggest.
yeah, like, there's parts where he's like, "Hey, kiddo," and like, "I love you," and like, to his sister, that's great. But the rest of it's anxiety.
And I can so relate to the idea of, like, I've taken this walk 50,000 times, but this time it's gonna give me a panic attack.
Yeah,
Like, that
like,
is my life.
I cannot validate that. Where I'm like, "What the hell? We just did this.
Funny,
Where's this coming from?"
that just happened to me, like, this week where, I'm a teacher and I'm at school and I'm outside with the kids and I'm like and now the playground is giving me anxiety, like, to be outside on this area, like, and I don't wanna be here, and it's like, that kinda thing of, like, I have no choice, like, I'm the one supervising these children, but it's like that anxiety of, like, why do I even have it? And then the anxiety giving you anxiety, like, it's
yeah.
so that's just such a perfect way
Mhm.
to describe it the way that you did, and it really sucks to have it, but, at least you got something from it to have a new way to describe it for a book.
Yes.
So one of the medications that Andy's taken is the Suboxone,
Mhm.
and I wanted you to touch on that a little bit with that relationship, and because it does touch into a few things with like being young, making mistakes, different things, but eventually, like, him having to take medication there really does play into the story. But I wanted you to get an opportunity to share a little bit about how you drafted that part for the character.
So, with Andy, I actually worked with a sensitivity reader for him.
Mm.
'Cause, so with Alice, she's autistic and she has anxiety. Those I have direct personal experience with. Andy is an ADHDer in recovery from substance use disorder. And like I have a lot of the autism ADHD overlap traits. So there are pieces of me I put into Andy. But I mostly come from like what he's experiencing as a loved one to a person who has these disabilities. And so I did a lot of research first. Like the initial step was just binged tons and tons of YouTube videos by people with ADHD and with substance use disorder, and made sure I understood as much as I could. I wrote my draft, went through the first round of edits with my editor, and then I reached out to a sensitivity reader, and they helped me to kind of like strengthen his character. And like one thing I really held back on initially was like I was so afraid of being stigmatizing that like I wouldn't let him have any like insecurities, and they like let him be human, let him be flawed. And I think that really worked and really helped make him a much stronger character who people relate to a lot more.
Really liked him like a whole lot. And I guess coming from someone who is ADHD, but also, for the longest time, I thought I had like an eating disorder. And yet I was like, oh, I just like did not have my ADHD under control. I didn't understand how much impulsivity and like the lack of dopamine. I mean, so many things. And it's just like, who knows when Andy got diagnosed and what choices he was presented with and everybody's he's doing his best, his damn best, and I think his parents are a little I think that's why they kind of set him up there. I think at first, mom and dad are I don't want to say they're punishing him because it doesn't seem like it's a super recent thing, but it's like, you know, you can go ahead and clean all this out. You can handle this. You can take care of this for us. This will be good for you. Kind of like I don't know, they kind of feel like they didn't give up on him, but, like, at the very beginning of the book, like, they just kind of you could tell there's, like, disappointment, especially between the dad and him, and so I feel like you just explored, that parent-child relationship of an adult child with dealing with things really well, where he's trying his best. He doesn't want to. He's clearly a wonderful brother, a good person, wants to do good things with the parents, but he's just made, some mistakes. And not all that is completely his fault because of, what he's working through with this diagnosis. So he did come across very human.
Yeah, definitely. And I love overall just the how much representation there is in this book. And, just reading from like the forward and in the first book, how you kind of almost, mirrored, on the pathway like Alice, where it's like, discovering that have autism and how that kind of works and slowly goes into sort of understanding the characters and putting that in more. And just wanted to kind of talk about that journey that you had personally, and how that came into the book. And I think that like so many people are going to and have discovered that representation and really going to see themselves in a protagonist that's not stereotyped, that's not falling into tropes that so many other places do. And really find something that gives them some power and strength, and I just love that.
When I first drafted this, like the very rough draft, our understanding of autism was very different from what it is now. Like our diagnostic criteria were even different. And so, like growing up, I had a sense I was different, and I was even put in speech and language therapy as a kid to help me learn how to socialize better with my peers. So I knew there was something different about me, but I didn't necessarily understand it or know why. So in those early drafts, put some of those like that frustration of like, why am I so weird into Alice without even like knowing where it was coming from. And then when I was in my mid 20s, that was the first time I read an article by an autistic woman, and she was talking about the experience of masking. And the idea that, you are able to like put on a persona to interact with people, or you have to like actually try to interact with people because it seems like, for a lot of people, it just comes natural. They know what to say, they know how to carry a conversation. For me, like I have to like come up with like scripts and like, if I can like think of, with like three different sentence, like small talk pieces of information to like carry on a conversation with someone with, I feel like I'm doing a good job, if I can
Yeah.
keep it going for a few.
A
And
few
so
balls.
that was the first time I started suspecting I might be autistic, but I very quickly forgot about it. And it wasn't until during the early part of the pandemic, I was binge watching a lot of YouTube, mostly writing craft videos. But one day YouTube is like, hey, here's this video about autism. You want to see it? And I remembered that article and I was like, okay, we'll watch it. And it was on selective mutism and autism. And I was like, well, this sounds familiar. And so then I went down like a deep dive. And I was like, okay, this really sounds like me. Well, around that same time, a few months after because I finished my PhD in May of 2020, I took a few months off to try and like get my mental health in order, which the pandemic was not helping with.
Mhm.
And then I went back to work on Little White Flowers because I was like, now that my degree is done, I really want to finish this book for once and for all. And like looking at Alice, I was like, I kind of like she's kind of seems autistic too. And so I decided to lean into that, especially once I had because there's always this fear that like, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm just thinking I'm autistic when I'm not? So once I had like the confidence of a diagnosis, I was like, okay, I do know what autism is. I can represent this in a character.
Definitely. And I really like there's a part where Riley has been in book 2 really criticized that Alice has essentially bewitched him, really even with accusations of her being a witch, which I thought was really fun that you kind of brought in some of that of course a woman can't be this. Of course they have to just be a witch, right? But they're like, "Well, Riley was never even interested in women before, and now look what she did to him." And you say, "Well, he said that he would never even consider a woman if they were interested in math, and he had never met anyone that was." And I just felt very seen by that, and I feel like Adam, you too, of being like, there's always people that I feel like can be attractive or whatever, but like if they don't see you as like the person or get you as like what makes you tick and how you're different in some of those ways. It just felt so loving and sweet to be like, and it like all of a sudden unlocked something for Riley and for Alice, of someone gets me. I'm not weird anymore. Like we love the same things. I just felt like that was you and I, Adam, for certain parts. Like it felt very sweet to me. So was wondering if you would like to elaborate on that love relationship and just that hope of like, wow, someone is out here for me.
Yeah, so, I think some of this comes from a little bit like, my husband is very different from Riley, but we have a similar understanding, like, we're 2 people who just kind of, like, clicked from very early on. So we met in undergrad and, very, very like, within a few conversations, like, we met in like, this commuter lounge where commuter students hung out, and, we went very quickly to just, like, having long conversations with each other, and we could just talk about all kinds of things, and, I would do things like when on one of our first dates, I was trying to be normal, and so, like, I ate half
Oh,
of my he got subs, and so, like, I ate half of my sandwich, like, just normally, but I would do this thing where I would rearrange the pieces so it tastes best because I like to finish with, like, the best taste on the end, and so, like, I
Exactly.
was like, "I can't."
I love this for you. Like my talking my language. Go on.
It's just like, I can't pretend to be normal anymore, and, like, I just rearranged my sandwich right there, and it was no big deal, and so I definitely think, pulling from my own experiences of what it feels like to click with someone like that and what it's like to find someone who supports you, no matter what, and, like, even when you're struggling, um, because, like, he's been by my side, like, through just so much, and has helped me through so much, and so, definitely, like, seeds of that came from my own relationship.
That
yeah,
makes sense. And I think for even though Riley and Alice barely know each other, I feel like as you're rooting for them as like they've found their soul person, and you're like,
yeah,
this could be there forever, because they click so well, and that's such an unusual happenstance when you
yeah.
have, yeah.
Well, I really love too because you talked about masking before, and I don't have a specific diagnosis, but when I hear some of these things, I
Mhm.
really relate to them, and I think that like masking and any of these things where you're talking about like the scripting and all these kind of things to try to like quote unquote act normal, like in any of these social situations, I feel like I come away from them exhausted, and then you find somebody that when you talk to, you're not exhausted after talking with
Well,
them
that was easy.
because, like, it is like you said, where it's like you can rearrange your sandwich and not have to worry about what they think about it. It's fine.
Mhm.
And, like, definitely that's how it is when I met Rebecca because it was very much like other people, I'm like,
Do you
"It's
want to talk
fine."
about my sandwich?
Well, it's like other,
Mine was
people, it's like it can be fine and all that kind of stuff, but, like, I come away drained, whereas other people,
mhm.
that kind of have that understanding, it's like, now I get why people want to spend time with other people,
Mhm.
whereas, like, other times I'm like, I just wanna go read and do my own thing, and, like,
Mhm.
I'll deal with people when I have to. Is that kinda similar for you?
Yeah, definitely, like, I mean, I enjoy some level of socializing thing like,
Right?
when I
Yeah.
do book events and whatnot, I have a lot of fun, but it takes so much energy, and, like,
Yeah.
the one person who I don't feel like I have to recharge from is my husband because, like, we just kind of get each other. We spend a lot of the day and, like, we can just, like, in companionable silence. Like, we don't
Yeah.
necessarily have to do anything together. Like, there are things we do together, like, we, love hiking and stuff like that, but, just having someone who, like, doesn't expect you to, like, constantly, like, talk
Yes.
to them or who you can ramble to and it's okay. You're not weird because you're rambling for like 5 minutes or 10 minutes.
That I can stim around means everything to me. That'll stim with me. But I was giggling because Francesca, our exchange student, said, "Yeah, I was learning about the differences between ADHD and autism in class." And I was like, "Okay, like that's cool." She's like, "Yeah." And when I heard the differences and said, she's like, "Oh," I was like, "Oh, that one's Adam." And I was like, "Oh, like okay." So she's just like,
Well, it's
I was
funny.
trying to master what the differences were, and she's
Yeah,
like,
when you talked about the sandwich, it's like I don't have to rearrange it in a way that, like, the taste is good, but I have after every bite, I have to shake off the excess pieces because it's not gonna be as good,
"Yeah."
so, like,
If
and
it's
it's
really good, you're always shaking the bread.
yeah, just different things where it's just like, that just makes the food better, and, like, you just have to understand that if you're gonna eat around me, and if you
Yeah,
can't, then it's like
I really
so
thought you were gonna share about me and my sandwich and how I had no clue that I was offending you or, not or wait, you know what I mean?
yes.
Because to me, I was like, "There's no way I'm eating this sandwich without extra onions on
When
it."
yes, when we our first date, we stopped at McDonald's, and it's because, like, I don't know if you remember this commercial, it was, like, the early 2000s where it was their first date, and they go through the drive-through, and the girl orders a cheeseburger with no onions, and he kinda realizes, "Oh, she plans on kissing," because she didn't want onions, and we go, and she's like, "I want a cheeseburger with extra onions," and I was like,
Uh-huh.
"Oh, okay. I see what's going on here."
And I'm just
So,
thinking, like, there's no way
that's
I
just
can
how I eat it,
there's
yeah.
if I can't have it masked and I just need to taste all onions, you know what I mean? So it's like I'm not even thinking about the social nature of it. So we
No.
we laugh about that a lot.
Yeah, I just love that, the aspect of the relationship, both yours personally and in the book of like that person that it's like, okay, I can be myself. And other people talk about that, but like it's very, for people with these, whether it's autism, ADHD, anxiety, all this kind of stuff, you go through life navigating feeling whether it's weird or different or like people aren't going to understand. And you capture beautifully what it's like when you have someone that does understand that. So I really love that.
And how easily, like, I think that, I mean, I do think Riley's an upstanding person as is, but the fact that, like, that he's found this person works in your book so well on that, like, soul meeting another person's soul, because I think that would have been the only thing that ever would have woken him up from the religious, like, smothering.
Yeah.
Right? Of this, just kind of like, I'm thinking that he just has this like patina of just like conservatism all over him. And like somehow he breaks the mold, like he cracks out of it. And it's like he's considering like I said, like doing things that he's never done before. He's being risky, he's thinking through things. He's telling her things that he shouldn't about the town that, that but he can't help himself because, he's found this person that it just, he's come alive in a way that he's never been before. And I think that if you hadn't set that dynamic up of how much it feels like to just know your person, then the lengths to which he goes for the whole book and to help them try to leave this town, it wouldn't have worked as well.
So this book comes out June 30th. Do you have like I have not seen anywhere like in terms of like how long this series is going to be? Do you know how many books there's going to be? Like do you have like an end, in sight and that kind of stuff? Like cuz that has to be exciting and I'm interested anytime talking to author that is doing a series. When did you know you had a series here?
So there is one more book. It's then that one. I actually just got my editor's line edits back today.
Nice. Today.
Um,
Wow.
I'm
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm really excited because I did a very big developmental pass over the winter. And so I'm really glad that they were happy with a lot of the changes I made. And I'm feeling really, really happy with where the story is at. And hopefully, it's going to be a really great finale to the series. As for when I realized I had a series on my hand, as I was editing it, so back in right after I finished my master's degree, that was the first major overhaul I did. So my very rough draft of the book basically covered the timeline of books 1 and 2. very roughly, like, the ending was completely different, but it was very bare bones. It was, like, just all action and dialogue, and when I started, like, fleshing things out, adding in scene setting details and all that kind of stuff, the word count just kept getting bigger and bigger, and once it got past 120,000 words and I wasn't anywhere near done, I was like, "I guess I'm probably gonna have to split this."
Yeah.
And then I wrote, like, a very rough draft of book 2, but as I was then revising book 1 again in 2020, the story really blossomed, and, like, I got all these elements coming together, that added new stuff, for book 2, but the original ending I had, it didn't feel right with the political climate. It wasn't really setting the message that I wanted it to, and so I was like, think I have to end this way, but if I do this, then we're gonna need a 3rd book." And so
Uh,
that was kinda how that
yes,
happened.
we do. Yes, we do. Yeah, I can't wait to read the third one because that's going to be one of those where, I mean, it genuinely is like, let me know when that's coming out because I need it. Uh, at the same time, I'm like, I'm done with these people. I don't want to read about them anymore. And that's a compliment to you. To be irritated by the way you've created fictional characters to be like, they're rat bastards, a lot of them. So really, I don't know how you can pack so much into one book, but you definitely did. Or two books. But I mean, I guess like one series. I mean, it's like just you have a lot of horrors, not horrors, all in this whole series that we could probably take a class just on your books on the amount of different things that we're talking about. I mean, you pack a lot. And I just wanted to say again, I think you mentioned about the sensitivity readers and things, but you are very careful with how you and in book 2, you're like, hey, I'm gonna talk a little bit about maybe something with an animal, and you're like, I try to do as light as I could. And I really think you did, because I kind of was like, "Oh god, I don't know. I don't know if I wanna read this, but I'm gonna talk to her, so, I gotta make sure that I do it." And honestly, coming from being a huge animal lover, I think you did such a wonderful job. I wasn't upset. I wasn't mad. Like, it was really well done.
Well, thank you. I mean, I love animals too, so it's hard, but it was just something that was so necessary to drive one of the characters,
I think
it
you're
was.
right. I mean, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry. I just meant to say, like, yeah, I think you're right. Like, it really fit the plot. I mean, it's like you had to kind of do it.
Yeah, I love that. So, obviously, Little White Flowers is out now. Hallowed Deadly Seeds, June 30th. Are you thinking, like, next year for the final book?
Yeah, so end of June 2027, if everything goes according to plan, and it seems to be going well so far.
Awesome. Love that. So again, these books, serve so many great purposes, incredibly entertaining. The representation is awesome. I think they're so timely and, to pack all of those in these books is really a remarkable thing that you've done and we just wish you all the success for the second book's release and look forward to the third one and we just really appreciate you coming in and talking about these with us and hope that when the third book comes out and we finish the story that we're able to talk about that again.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a ton of fun.
Awesome. Thank
Yes,
you. Have
thank
a great
you.
night.
See you later. Bye
You too.
bye.
Bye.